August 23rd, 1961, 4:30 p.m. The boys in blue swarmed a Queens construction yard, chasing a tip about dead meat. What they uncovered would stick in their nightmares forever. 6 guys standing tall in the dirt, waist deep in wet concrete, each sporting a new hole in the head. These stiffs didn't drop. The cement held them up like statues, dead men standing at attention. Blood dried hard on their mugs, eyes wide open, mouths screaming in silence. The guy with the camera lost his lunch twice before he could even finish the job. Detective Frank Morrison, 20 years on the force, told his partners later, it was the sickest thing he ever saw. Standing in their own graves, the killer wanted them to know the clock was running out, wanted them to stand there and wait for the lights to go out. 2 hours later, we had names. Genovese soldiers out of Brooklyn. The feds jumped in fast. This wasn't just a hit. This was a war between families, big enough to bring the heat from Washington. But the cops didn't get the picture. What they couldn't prove was that 48 hours back, these mooks made the last bad bet of their lives. They pinched $250,000 from Bumpy Johnson, and what went down in those 2 days didn't just punch 6 tickets. It built a ghost story so scary that for the next 7 years, Bumpy ran the show. Nobody had the guts to touch his pockets again. Rewind to August 22nd. 4 in the morning, Illinois Gordon rings the boss with news that turned his blood to ice, even for a guy who lived by the gun. Boss, they hit the Lenox counting room. $250,000 large, gone in the wind. Clean work, real pros. It was the Genovese crew. 3 guys confirmed it. Vito sent 6 buttons from his Brooklyn outfit. They're already back over the bridge, toasting like they pulled off the perfect crime. The spot on Lenox was supposed to be Bumpy's fortress, where the numbers money, the loan shark cash, and the skim got tallied up and bagged. Steel doors, heaters on the guards, alarms. It should have been tight, but a rat gave up the schedule and the codes. The 6 Genovese punks walked in at 2 a.m., dropped 2 guards quiet-like, cut the wires, cracked the safe with the right numbers, and walked with $250,000. This wasn't a burglary. This was a spit in the face, disguised as a heist. Vito Genovese, the big don of the families, had been testing the fences with Bumpy for months. Turf beefs, arguments over the split, trying to muscle into Harlem territory that Bumpy owned. But putting hands on Bumpy's cash was a line you don't cross. This was a message. Genovese thought Bumpy was soft, didn't fear the payback, thought the Italians could take what they wanted from the black outfits and walk away clean. Bumpy's answer had to be heavy, fast, and so ugly that every wise guy in New York would know stealing from him meant a closed casket. What Vito didn't figure, what his prejudice made him blind to, was that Bumpy ran a network tighter than any Italian crew in the city, and he had a mind for cruelty that would rewrite the book on revenge. By 6 a.m. that morning, Bumpy knew the score. Professional hit. Real mechanics, not smash and grab junkies. Safe cracked with the combo, not blown open. Smooth operators. Inside man. Guards dropped without noise. Disciplined guys keeping their heads down. By 10 a.m., Bumpy had the roster. 3 canaries sang. Vito's boys from Brooklyn, laughing it up over a Harlem score. The sources named names. Anthony Little, Tony Russo, 32, built like a hydrant. Vincent DeLuca, 28, the beanpole. Michael Carbone, 35, all muscle. Thomas Ferraro, 31, regular guy. James Costello, 29, skinny with a cut on his cheek. Robert Amato, 33, the heavy one. All 6 made guys or associates, working out of a Brooklyn social club. By 2 in the afternoon, Bumpy knew where they slept, where they ate, and who they were seeing. By 8 that night, he had a dirty dozen ready to work. The play was simple. Bag all 6 at once so nobody makes a warning call. Hit 6 spots at the same second. Apartments, clubs, the girlfriend's place. August 22nd, 11:47 p.m. The job went off like a Swiss watch. At 11:47 sharp, the hammer dropped on all 6 spots. Tony gets snatched, leaving his Gumar's place in Brooklyn. Vinny taken from a bar. Mickey grabbed at his house. Tommy pulled out of his ride at a red light. Jimmy seized, stepping out of the club. Bobby taken right out of a restaurant. All 6 in the bag within 3 minutes. Tight work, nobody saw it coming. 1 minute living the life, next minute sniffing a rag and waking up in Queens. The 6 wise guys woke up around 1 a.m. on the 23rd. A construction site, just a big hole waiting for concrete. The site was dead silent under the cover of darkness, fenced off from prying eyes. 6 narrow pits had been dug into the earth, dropping down 6 feet deep. The fit was tight, barely enough room for a man to breathe. One by one, the soldiers were shoved into the ground, forced to stand tall in the dirt. With their wrists shackled behind their backs, the wet concrete began to flow. It filled the gaps around their legs, locking them into a permanent stance as it hardened. There was no sitting down, no wiggling free, and absolutely no way out. They were planted like statues in the very holes that would serve as their caskets. Bumpy Johnson rolled onto the construction site at 2 to 10 in the morning. He looked over the 6 men, waist deep in the earth, helpless in their standing tombs. They watched him walk up, the fear starting to set in. A few of them tried to keep their chins up, clinging to a shred of tough guy pride. Others broke instantly, pleading for mercy. Bumpy's voice was ice cold as he addressed the lineup. "Gentlemen, last night you lifted 250 grand from my business. You figured you could steal from me and walk away clean. You thought the name Vito Genovese was a shield. You were dead wrong. Let me teach you a lesson before you spend your last hours thinking about where you screwed up." Bumpy strolled past the line, locking eyes with each man. You are standing in your own funerals. The cement is drying around your ankles right now. You can't run, and you aren't going anywhere. You're going to stand here for the next 12 hours and think about your sins. Then, tomorrow afternoon at 2 o'clock sharp, you catch 1 bullet in the head. Your bodies stay right here, standing tall as a warning to anybody else who thinks my pockets are open for the taking. Anthony Russo, the thickest of the bunch, sweat dripping from his dark hair, tried to play the role of the hard-nosed gangster. "Genovese is going to bury you for this. Johnson, you're a walking corpse. You touch a made man, and the whole commission comes down on your head." Bumpy didn't even blink. The commission respects the laws of business. They'll see this for what it is, justice for a theft. Vito gave the order, and I'll deal with him on my own time. But as for you 6, you're already ghosts. You just haven't realized it yet. The next 12 hours are so you understand exactly why. Vincent DeLuca, a tall, skinny kid shaking with fear, tried a different angle. "Please, we were just doing what we were told." Vito ordered the hit on your count house. "We're soldiers. We follow orders. We'll return every dime, I swear. Just let us walk away from this." Bumpy shook his head slowly. "The cash is irrelevant. Giving it back doesn't change the fact that you took it. You made a choice to put your hands in my pocket. You boys celebrated like you pulled off the heist of the century. Now comes the bill. Michael Carbone, a musclehead who usually walked with a swagger, tried to cut a deal. Name the price. We got friends. We can get you cash way more than what we took. Double, triple, whatever number you want. Just don't leave us here." Bumpy's face remained carved from stone. "I don't need your money. I need every crook in New York City to see exactly what happens when you cross Bumpy Johnson. You 6 are the headline. You're going to stand in that dirt for 12 hours. You're going to think real hard about the choices you made. You're going to realize you're dying because you thought I was soft. And when they find your cold bodies tomorrow afternoon, standing tall in your own caskets, they'll know exactly what I'm capable of. The torture wasn't just physical. It was about breaking their minds. The 6 soldiers stood locked in their concrete shoes, unable to twitch a muscle, as the night bled into dawn, and dawn burned into the afternoon. Sleep was impossible. Their legs went dead as the concrete squeezed the blood flow. The sun hammered down on a sweltering August day, cooking their skin and drying them out like jerky. No food, barely a drop of water. But the worst part was the clock ticking down to the end. 12 hours of pure terror, waiting for that bullet at 2 o'clock. 12 hours watching the sun crawl across the sky, counting down the minutes until the lights went out. Some of them cracked under the pressure. Thomas Ferraro started sobbing like a baby when the sun came up. James Costello started screaming prayers, trying to cut a deal with God. Robert Amato spilled his guts about every crime he ever did, hoping confession was a ticket out. Others tried to hold it together. Anthony Russo stayed tough until noon hit. Then the exhaustion and the fear finally crushed him. Vincent DeLuca and Michael Carbone kept their mouths shut, staring death in the face. For 12 long hours, Bumpy's crew stood guard, watching for an escape that was physically impossible. They made sure no wandering eyes stumbled onto the grim scene, watching the soldiers' minds slowly rot away. At 2 o'clock on August 23rd, exactly 12 hours after the cement poured, the debt was called in. Illinois Gordon and his crew stepped up to the pits. Each executioner took his place in front of a cemented man and put a single bullet in the chamber. At exactly 2 o'clock, 6 guns fired at once. The bodies stayed upright, held in place by the concrete trap. Blood ran down their faces, but they didn't fall. They just stood there, dead men in their own graves, a gruesome art piece left for the world to see. At 4:30 that afternoon, a tipster rang the NYPD about bodies at a Queens site. The cops rolled up to find 6 men standing in holes, stone dead with holes in their heads. It was a slaughterhouse scene like no cop had ever witnessed. The concrete shoes, the upright bodies, the perfect timing, it was nightmare fuel. They quickly tagged the victims as Genovese muscle. The FBI jumped in immediately. This was organized violence on a level that screamed for the feds. Agents and detectives hit the streets, hunting for witnesses and digging for clues. The feds leaned hard on every known associate of Bumpy Johnson and Vito Genovese, but they hit a brick wall. Every soldier in Bumpy's crew had an alibi watertight enough to sink a case. No rats sang about the capture or the hit. The forensics at the construction site gave the cops nothing but a grim picture. 6 men planted in holes, cemented tight, and silenced with lead. But who pulled the trigger? Where they got snatched? How they got hauled there? Those questions vanished into the night like smoke. The investigation wrapped up with one conclusion: clear retaliation. But without a canary singing from the inside, the district attorney had nothing to work with. Vito Genovese took the news like a punch to the gut. He was boiling with rage at the executions and the sheer humiliation of having his roster wiped out so cleanly. But deep down, he knew the score. The robbery was his bad call. He signed off on hitting Bumpy without counting the true cost of the war he was starting. The commission, the 5 families that run New York, sat down at the table. They asked Bumpy to explain the bodies. His answer was cold and direct. 6 guys lifted 250 large from my operation. I didn't see a penny come back, so I took it out of their hides. That's standard procedure for thieves. If the table thinks I was out of line, go ahead and tell me how I should have played it. The bosses chewed on that for a bit. They decided Bumpy's play was heavy, sure, but understandable given the disrespect. They put the blame squarely on Vito Genovese for authorizing the theft. He wrote a check his men couldn't cash. Bumpy walked out without a scratch. Genovese got a slap on the wrist and a warning to keep the peace. Meanwhile, the standing burial became a dark legend whispered in every back room. The story traveled through the underworld like a virus. Every family, every crew, every network in New York knew the tale. But the hard facts never changed. 6 of Vito's soldiers robbed Bumpy Johnson, and the clock ran out on them within hours. They were planted upright in wet cement, left to stew in their own fear for 12 hours, then checked out all at once. The image of those 6 men, trapped in their own graves, waiting for the end, froze the blood of every tough guy in the city. It created a deterrent so heavy that nobody even thought about touching Bumpy's action for the next 7 years. Until he punched his final ticket in 1968, not a single family dared to make a move on his operations. That standing burial proved the price of admission was too high. Any other crew thinking about edging into Bumpy's territory? They folded. The message was written in stone. Bumpy Johnson would answer disrespect with overwhelming creative force. It was violence designed to break your mind. Years later, Illinois Gordon broke down the method behind the madness. He explained the strategy. The boss didn't just want dead bodies. He wanted to build a nightmare. He wanted a story so grim it would be told and retold forever. The standing burial did exactly that. It made hard men feel sick. Picture it, 12 hours cemented upright, waiting for the bullet. That visceral terror was the real weapon. Nobody wanted to end up a statue. The method was cold, calculated theater. When Bumpy Johnson passed in 1968, the standing burial was the first thing people mentioned. When they talked about power, they talked about how 6 Genovese soldiers stole from him and ended up planted in the ground. Shot simultaneously after half a day of terror, the story reached mythic status, the details getting bloodier with every telling. But the lesson stood tall. Stealing from Bumpy meant facing a punishment so severe it discouraged anyone from ever trying again. That business also shifted how the Italian families looked at the players uptown. Before the cement dried, some wise guys assumed the black operators didn't have the stomach or the skill for that kind of extreme violence. After the standing burial, nobody made that mistake again. Bumpy proved he ran a sophisticated machine. To bag 6 targets at once, the creative cruelty, the absolute commitment to the hit. He didn't care about the commission's heat. If you made it this far, smash that like button. If this story taught you anything about the life, it's that reputation is built on power so scary it becomes a legend. Drop a comment below. Was Bumpy justified, or did he go too far? Is there a line you don't cross, even in this business? Hit subscribe, because these stories shine a light on the real power dynamics of the underworld, and how a name is built on strategic violence. Let's run back the clock on those 48 hours. August 22nd, 4 a.m. Illinois Gordon rings the bell. 250,000 gone from the Lenox Avenue house. 6 Genovese soldiers did the job. 10 a.m. Our spies had every name. 11:47 p.m. The trap snaps shut, all 6 in the bag. August 23rd, 1 a.m. The cement pours. 6 soldiers planted in standing graves. The 12-hour mind game begins. 2 p.m., 1 shot each. Lights out. 4:30 p.m. The cops find the garden of statues. No evidence to stick. The commission nods it off. Genovese takes the L. The legend is born, and the streets stay quiet for 7 years. Nobody touched Bumpy. Those 6 graves were a better lock than any bank vault. That ain't just getting even. That is strategic brutality. You draw a line so deep in the dirt, the devil himself wouldn't cross it.